Yo, Ryan Hart here. Welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast channel. These are the interview sessions where I put my curious questions to inspiring people with one goal in mind, to help you be better than you were yesterday in your heart and in your mind. While you're here spending time with us, I'd love it if you subscribed, leave a like, or maybe drop a comment below with letting us know some of your thoughts on the interview. Please do share it with someone that you'd love to help be better too. Nick, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast, my friend. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Ron. How are you?
I'm really well. It wouldn't take our listeners too long just to Google your name and see a bunch of stuff on the internet. But before they do that, I'd love to give you the freedom of introducing yourself in the way that you would like to do so.
Oh, that's very kind. Okay, so I am an ex-police officer with Wiltshire Police, and I did 18 years, just short, a couple of months short of 18 years in the police. And in 2018, I got caught up with the assassination attempts on Sergei Skripal, the Russian ex-double agent who'd been released as part of an international spy swap and decided to set up home in Salisbury, which we didn't know about at the time. And so I was on duty the day that event happened, and as a result got rather ill because I got poisoned with a nerve agent, and then things just started to kind of spiral out of control after that. And as a result of that, I was released from my duties in the police back last year. I was deemed incapable of being a police officer, so I was medically pensioned off. So it was been a bit of a weird few years for me, really, and for my family as well. But started to come out the other side of it now. It's taken a while. There's no blueprint for how long it should take, but you just kind of go along and see where it takes you and ride the wave, and then just start to try and come out the other side, I think. And that's what we're starting to do.
I'm really grateful that you're going to spend some time with us and share part of your story. And I'm just really grateful. And yours and I paths crossed whilst you were working at headquarters. I think the things we both had in common is that we both had no idea what we were doing.
Oh no, I was hoping you were going to bring this up, because I was going to say you will remember me from being in the staff office when it was obvious that I had literally no idea what I was doing. And I didn't try to kind of hide that, really. But I just muddled my way through with comedy and making myself look like a clown, and it seemed to work for a couple of years. But I never thought for 1 second, Ryan, that you didn't know what you're doing. You always seem to be very on top of what your portfolio was. So.
Speak quickly with confidence is. But from that people will know from my background in the police, I dealt with data and analytics and demand, and on a Sunday in March in Salisbury is like the quietest our county would ever be.
Yeah.
And yet talk to us about the events of Sunday 4th of March 2018. Okay. Take us through that day, if you will.
Yeah, of course. So it was, for me, it was a normal, as you say, one would be quiet Sunday evening. I was a DS, detective sergeant in the CID in Salisbury. I had a team of 5 DCs. Went in to do a normal Sunday evening shift starting at 3, was meant to finish at 12 in the morning. And after a couple of hours of doing the usual stuff, I was reviewing a case at the time for a colleague of mine. Just had a call on the radio. There was a couple of people were found slumped, kind of semi-conscious, and I think it was described that they were kind of heavily salivating. They were on a bench in the city centre. And so I was just listening to this. It's not something that the CID would get involved in immediately. It could have been a whole host of possibilities. It could be alcohol, drugs overdose. It could have been a medical emergency. But I was just listening away, and officers were going down to assess the scene and what was going on. And I just thought, you know what, I'm a little bit bored of what I'm doing at the moment. I'm a bit of a nosy bugger at the best of times. So I thought I'll have a wander down and see if I can help in any way. I wasn't going down to take over. I didn't need to do that. It was being managed brilliantly by the response team, the duty sergeant. I just thought I'll go down and just have a look and just see what it's all about. Because if it turns into something that we need to be involved in, I'd rather know about it from the very beginning than play catch up. So we went down there. I went down there. The 2 patients had already been taken away by paramedics. The scene itself was normal. There was nothing there to suggest what had happened. I could have hung around for a bit, tried to make myself useful. Spoke to a few people in the local area to see if they knew anything that had happened. Went back to the bench, saw that we had one of the patients, who we now know to be Sergei Skripal. His coat was there with a wallet, and in his wallet was a driver's license with his home address, which was Salisbury. And it kind of went from there, really. We for quite a few hours, well, for probably 24 hours, we didn't actually know what happened to them. But I couldn't do anything at the scene, so I made my way back up to the station, but carried on helping with it. Just couldn't do anything there and then. And it kind of progressed from there throughout the evening. And I remember vividly how we found out and when we found out who he was, and then the significance of the fact that he'd become ill. I was talking to the duty inspector about all the different scenes that we had. We found his car, which was parked up locally in a car park. We had the bench, we had his house. And as we were discussing the house, about going into the house, a colleague of mine who had literally Googled his name, that's all she did, was Google his name. I remember, never forget it. She said, "Sarge, you're going to need to come and see this." And I went over, looked over his shoulder, and there was a picture of Sergei Skripal. It was a photo from a newspaper article. It was a picture of him effectively behind bars, and the heading, or the subheading, was explaining that he was a Russian ex-spy who'd been released as part of an international spy swap. And obviously at this point, the severity of what we could be dealing with, we still didn't know. It could have still been a medical emergency, nothing for the police, but the severity and suddenly the possibilities of what this could mean hit the roof, as you can imagine. So and it just progressed from there. It suddenly became a bit of a whirlwind of rushing about, briefing the chain of command, briefing crime scene investigators and the crime scene management team, briefing superintendents, the control room. And as the evening progressed, one of the SIOs, the senior investigating officers who was on call, he came down to kind of take charge of what was going on. And when he got to the station, it was decided that we needed to go into the house, which we talked about doing for a couple of hours, but one reason or another we didn't do it. We just needed to make sure the scene was secure, but we needed to go into the house to see if there's anybody else there, firstly, and also see if it was a crime scene, see if there was a crime. We didn't know, again, like I said before, and I'll keep saying that we didn't know that it was a crime. And so we had to borrow PPE from the fire station, because Salisbury Bourne Hill Police Station, we share the building with the council.
I'm not
we
sure
didn't have any.
It back.
No, they didn't. So we had to borrow some PPE from the fire station, and three of us went to the house, put on our PPE. So we had full forensic suits, overshoes, latex gloves, masks, goggles. I took the key from the officer who was guarding the address, unlocked the door, and went in. And then it was at that point, unknowingly, that my glove that was now saturated in nerve agent. I didn't know that until quite a while down the line that was the case, because we didn't know how it had happened until quite some time after all this. But we walked around, went into the house, all very normal, nothing suspicious. There was no one there. Did what we needed to do, checking it, and then left up to the hospital after that to get an update on the patients, and there wasn't one. Back to the station to write up a handover for the oncoming shift, which was a very long handover, as you can imagine. And I left at about 7 a.m. the following, so the Monday morning. And at that point, I remember feeling I felt odd. I felt very, very tired, like exhausted, tired, and I was sweating. And I remember looking in the mirror at the police station. My pupils were like pinpricks. But all this I just put down to, what's been a really stressful, long shift. One of the worst ones I'd ever done in terms of kind of like trying to manage this situation and the potential of what it could be. We had to kind of consider, and it was a long, stressful shift. But I put it down to I'm just tired. That's all it is. And went home Monday morning, had a few hours sleep, got woken up with a phone call from work asking me about the events of the night before. By afternoon, I was still feeling the same, just slightly worse, and decided to go to the hospital to get checked up, which I did. Went up to A&E. They checked my vitals. Everything seemed fine. They couldn't account for my tiny pupils, but I kind of this sense of relief. I was like, you know what? They've told me I'm all right, so it must just be something normal, And went back home again, had a very normal evening, went to bed, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and then things started to go rapidly downhill for me, really. I mean, I can only really describe that night as incredibly restless. I had like nightmares. I just kind of like hallucinations. I don't know if you saw the drama where Rafe Spall, who plays me in the drama, which is really odd to have somebody like Rafe Spall playing me. But he was shown in the drama as being able to see fire in front of his eyes, and it was literally that. Like it was like a tsunami of fire. Like it's almost like the surface of the sun. That's how I would describe it. And it was so real. I could feel the heat of it, and woke up about 5 a.m, absolutely drenched in sweat, really unsteady on my feet. Stumbled downstairs to get a glass of water. My vision was completely impaired. It was not smooth motion of eyes. It was kind of like still frames juddering as I was looking around, as opposed to it being really, really smooth looking around. Managed to stumble back upstairs. I then threw up in the toilet, threw up again, and it was at this point I became terrified, because this was not right. Something was wrong, and went back to hospital. Phoned ahead, went back to hospital, into A&E. And I had many tests in A&E, a lot of blood tests, lots of doctors, consultants, nurses were kind of milling around me at this point in the side room in A&E. And then I was told, you have nerve agent in your bloodstream and you need to stay. Initially I was told, you've got to stay here for 24 to 48 hours and we'll give you the antidote for it and we'll just see how you go. But that kind of 24 to 40 hours turned into 17 days, because I was taken to ICU, and that's when I was told by a consultant, you have a nerve agent called Novichok in your system, something that I'd never heard of, something that most people have never heard of. And it kind of just went from there, really. And then a whole host of traumatic events and stresses came after.
What is Novichok? What effect does it have?
It's very difficult. People ask me, what's it like to be poisoned with a nerve agent, or what effect does it have? It's very difficult for me to distinguish, because as well as the physical symptoms I had so much emotional and kind of mental stresses going on. Sometimes I can't distinguish between the two. It was making me feel sick. My heart was flying. My vision was impaired. But it's like I say, it's really difficult to explain it. Alexei Navalny described it perfectly once, because obviously he was poisoned as well a while ago. And when he was able and he recovered, he was able to talk about it, and he explained it perfectly. He said it's he basically said that it's not, you know something's wrong with you. It doesn't hurt necessarily. You know something's wrong, and then after a while, basically, it gets to a point where you think, that's it. I'm going to die, and that's kind of it. It's not really something that you feel. It just feels like it's taking your life away from you, and it's just you feel like it's only a matter of time before I kind of slip into a coma and then go. And that's how I felt. It was very scary place to be, along with everything else that was going on as well, because obviously it wasn't just a normal injury at work. It became a global story, and all the political ramifications, and it became huge. And so my family were dealing with that as well as me, and it wasn't just the injury, it was everything else that came with it.
One thing I found really difficult to watch was the way that the media was just using your image as the hero cop, the hero cop.
I had a massive problem with that.
Yeah, and you referred to that in your kind of statement as you left hospital. You didn't consider you're not a hero, and that you were just doing a job that you loved. Like, what's your take on that time and the way that the media was blowing up around it?
The media were relentless when it was found. Obviously, the story broke about Sergei and his daughter Yulia having been poisoned, and there was also discussion that a police officer had been taken critically ill as well. And they were relentless in trying to find out who that person was. So the police decided to take control of that, which was understandable, and put my name out there. And I kind of shut off at that point, because we kind of felt suddenly we weren't anonymous anymore. We weren't private. Our lives were being almost played out internationally, and it's not something that we ever kind of wanted to happen. So it was very difficult to deal with that, and then to hear and see these articles and these stories about local hero poisoned with critically ill, poisoned with Novichok. I was like, I'm not. I really, it sounds silly, but I really took offense to being called a hero. I couldn't stand that, because I was like, I'm not. I've not done anything heroic. I did my job like we all do. And, there's always a risk in the police, in the emergency services. There's always that risk that you're going to become injured, something's going to happen to you. But obviously, you don't prepare yourself for something like this. But there's always that risk. But I don't think any police officer or anybody in the emergency services would consider themselves heroes. It's that kind of, it's a job that you do. And I really found that difficult. I really wanted to put the story straight as well. I didn't want people to think that I considered myself a hero, because I really, really didn't. And that's why I wanted to, I made that statement when I was let out, of discharged from hospital, to say, I'm not. I'm a normal cop that did my duty, did my shift, did it the best I possibly could, and this is what happens. And I wanted to kind of stem that discussion around like the local hero kind of thing. It's really difficult for me to accept that.
And you spent, is it just over 2 weeks in hospital, and you had young family and a wife at the time, and it's not just you going through the journey as well. Like how was the family affected at that time specifically?
Yeah, it was very difficult for them. Not only because they had to deal with the fact that I was in hospital and in critical condition, and not knowing how this was going to play out at all. So they had that kind of stress to deal with, but everything else that was going on. And like I say, the press were relentless. They were hounding. Fortunately, they weren't hounding my wife and my kids, but everybody else, which my wife had to kind of deal with to a certain extent. And my wife's amazing. She was amazing throughout, always has been with this. And we were very honest. We decided really early on to be really honest with the kids, without going into like the finer detail. They didn't need to know that. But being quite open and honest about, this is what's happened. He got poisoned with what's called a nerve agent, something obviously they didn't know what it was, and we had to, but we wanted to be honest with them so they understood, so they weren't kind of caught out with anything that they saw. And my youngest daughter, she was in primary school, so those discussions around what was happening would never come about in her kind of little environment. But my eldest, she was a secondary, and she was reading the news a lot as well. She was very, very inquisitive and wanted to kind of keep abreast of what was going on. And so she found it, the kids found it really difficult. But we said all along, when all this is, whilst all this is going on, we will do our best to keep them as stable as we possibly can, give them as normal a life as we possibly can. Regardless of where we are and what's happening, we need to make that normal for them and give them the space, but also keep that honest kind of conversations going with them, so that they're not kind of caught out in anything. And it seemed to work as well. They showed great resilience. I mean, incredible resilience the children did throughout this.
Yeah, I got such admiration for you and your family, my friend. And you, I understand, as you left hospital, you didn't go home. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's about a week. The first weekend I was in hospital, it was one of the hardest ones, because that was when Sarah had been told by the police, and obviously the police were passing on this message to them to say, you can't go back to the house. Well, you can go back to the house, but you can't stay there. You've got to basically go and pack up a few things, because we're worried about contamination. And that was difficult for them to take, because they'd been there for 4 or 5 days whilst I was in hospital, and then suddenly they're being told it's too dangerous to be there, you've got to leave. And so, I mean, I never went back to our house. I left hospital after 2.5 weeks, and by this point they were in a rental house. And that was really tricky to explain to the kids, you're not going home. We're going to be moved about. I mean, the first night they basically stayed in the B&B, then they went to a holiday home, and then the day I was let out of discharged from hospital, we then all met up in this rental house, which is a bit more long term. And when we decided, for a whole host of reasons, we kind of decided we can't go back to that house for so many kind of emotional reasons. We had to explain that to the children. We're not going to go home. We're going to have to buy a new house, but don't worry, because the new house we will fill with all of our belongings. So it's new walls, new place, but it will feel like home. We will make it home. But it was only a few weeks after that, or it felt like a few weeks after that, did we have to tell them we can't do that. We've got to, all of our belongings have to be destroyed because of contamination. They couldn't clean it and certify it safe. It was just too big a task. So the easiest solution the most efficient way to deal with this problem was just to destroy everything we owned. And that's including the children's belongings, everything that they had. So we had to then tell the children, we can't do that. We have to get a new house, and we will have to fill it with new things. And that was really tough, because that was when the point we felt like really our lives are completely out of our control now. We are completely dependent on other people to help us through this process of trying to stabilize our lives again. It was really tricky. Tricky. But I talk about this, and I quite possibly sound a little bit hard done by, and I don't mean to be, but I'm also incredibly lucky, and I never lose sight of how lucky I actually am, because I'm still here, and it doesn't matter where we live, but I'm here, and the kids have still got their dad, and my wife's still got her husband. So that was the most important thing. That's what we kind of focused on a lot.
Yeah, such admiration for you, and I think it'll only take a googling of the story to realise that there was a later poisoning, and unfortunately a lady by the name of Dawn Sturgis did lose her life, which I imagine is what you're referring to there around.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
But that's such admiration, and I don't know whether this is too personal a question, but I think there was a scene within the Salisbury poisonings drama documentary that where almost after there's a paranoia about yourself and being contaminated and being around the kids. Was that something mentally in the early days that you had to really process and deal with?
Yeah, definitely. I had this complete paranoia, certainly for the first 4 or 5 days in the hospital. I was so paranoid about the children becoming ill and my wife becoming ill. Which I think is understandable. And actually, when we found out later that they found nerve agent in our house, including my youngest daughter's bedroom, traces of it, but enough, to cause a problem. It's a wonder how they didn't become ill. And I had an enormous amount of guilt. I dealt with so much guilt that I had unknowingly, I didn't mean to do this. I didn't know it was happening, but I had taken this deadly substance back to my home, back to my family, and I felt this huge amount of guilt that I'd taken it to the police station, and I put my colleagues in danger as well, and that was a really difficult thing to deal with. And when the paranoia just kept going. So for the first few days, I wasn't sleeping really. I was very restless at night. I couldn't sleep, and my wife at home couldn't sleep, and we were having text message conversations. And I remember saying to her, "Please just go and check on the kids. Go and check their eyes. Make sure their eyes look normal. Wake them up and check their eyes." That was a sensible thing to do. But that's how I was feeling. I was so worried. In the mornings, my wife would text me. And I'd say, "How are the kids? How are you feeling? Are you all right? How are your eyes? Are you feeling sick at all?" And when back then, a few months down the line, I think it was July, I can't remember, when Dawn and Charlie became ill, this paranoia hit me again. I was like, oh my God, is this something that I've done somehow? Have I caused that? And suddenly I was thinking, is there some kind of really long, my symptoms were fairly delayed by a couple of days, to the point where I was actually hospitalized, but I suddenly was thinking, is there some kind of really long delay in this poison, this nerve agent hitting you? Is this something going to happen to my children? And I had to fight that for a long time. But as time went by, it was obvious that actually they kind of dodged that invisible bullet, and so that kind of paranoia and that guilt started to move away. But the guilt didn't move away. I still feel guilty now, but obviously my family don't want me to feel like that, but it's one of those little niggling things you have in the back of your head.
I understand, or at least I can try to understand. But what was the journey to your first day back at work? What were some of the things that you had to do to start your own recovery?
So this happened in March, and I didn't go back to work the first time. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Back in January the following year, and I kind of got to late summer into autumn, and I was like, you know what, I'm physically I'm okay. That's kind of gone past me now, and things are starting to settle down home wise. We've got another house now, and we're starting to feel like home. And I was like, I need to try this. I need to do this for myself, to give it another go. And I said, but I need to get this year out of the way because this year's been crap. So let's get 2018 out of the way and I'll start afresh in the new year. And I felt ready to try. I don't know if I felt ready to do it, but I felt ready to try that process of going back. And I did. And I went back up to headquarters where we used to see each other. And I tried that first. And I kind of realized pretty quickly that something wasn't right. It just didn't feel the same again. And I was struggling. And I think I was there for probably 2 or 3 months before I went off. And I started taking leave, actually. I started going, can I just have a bit of holiday? Can I have a week's holiday? I wasn't well enough to be at work, but I kind of didn't want to acknowledge that. And I didn't want to accept it and make it obvious that I was really struggling. So I was like, I'll just take a couple of weeks. I've got so much holiday to take. I'll take it there, here and there. And I realized actually that's the wrong thing to do because I'm just fooling myself. And it was becoming so difficult to kind of go into that environment and not pretend like nothing had happened, but just carry on. And I crashed and burned again after a few months of being there. It just became too difficult. So I took then the summer again to try and reset and just try and get a bit of perspective and try and figure out what I had to do. And I wanted to try again. And I did. And each time I tried, I tried 3 times in total to go back, and each time just got shorter and shorter. The third time I went back, I knew when I went back, this isn't going to work, but I have to try one more time. And I was there 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I was like, I can't be it. I can't do it anymore. And that acceptance it was really difficult to kind of acknowledge that dream of being a police officer, which I had that dream since I was a teenager, and then the reality of joining and all that stuff that you have to go through to get to there, and then all the years that I did to build up my confidence and my skills and my abilities was kind of like ripped out from underneath my feet. And that was a really difficult thing to accept. And I grieved for my job as well. I did. And then when I was told, I asked to go down this route to explore the medical pension route, not knowing how that was going to play out because you just don't know until you're there. And but then to be told by the doctor, the guy that assessed me, to say, yeah, you're incapable of doing this job of being in the police, that was really difficult to take. Even though in a way it was probably the best outcome for me, it was still really difficult to accept that somebody was saying, following from a professional assessment, no, you can't do this. And that was tricky. But I'm through that now.
But not the one that you wanted to hear, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it. I never wanted that to happen. I was going to finish my career in the police and do the 35 years, whatever it is that I needed to do. I was going to finish that, and
it probably was always about 40 by the time you got there.
Well, yeah, I still don't really know how many years I had to do. I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows what they've got to do anymore. But yeah, no, that was the plan: is to retire naturally at my retirement age in the police, and look back at my career in the police and say, look what I achieved, and it was taken from me to a certain extent. But you know what? It's fine. I can look back at it now, and I'm content. I'm comfortable with that decision, and I don't grieve for the job anymore, and life is good. That's the way I have to look at it now. But I've had some really difficult times as well. I'm saying that life is good, but I hit, after a couple of years of this happening. So, but yeah, 2020. I hit my lowest point. I hit rock bottom, and it was affecting everything because I felt like I'd lost control of my life and work. The reason I tried so hard to make work was because it felt like it was the only thing that I could control. It was the only thing that I would actually be able to keep hold of by my fingertips, but keep hold of it and make that work. And everything felt like it was crumbling around me. It had a massive impact on my marriage. That became incredibly difficult, and it was all because of me. It was all because of the way I was, and I'd literally hit this rock bottom moment. And fortunately, I had a kind of like a mirror moment, and I can't really remember how it came about, but I think it came about because I was having issues. My marriage felt like it was failing because of what was going on with me, and I had this mirror moment. And I think it's because I felt like I could lose even more than I've already lost, and this moment of reflection where I kind of stopped giving myself a hard time, stopped grieving for my former self, started to embrace how I was feeling acknowledge that I was suffering with depression, and I probably had PTSD. And that was the biggest moment for me, was that moment, because I started then to learn about myself, learn from what had happened to me, started to talk to my loved ones, started to tell them how I was actually feeling. And actually that changed me massively. And it was the biggest moment, that mirror moment that I had. It was huge for me, because it started a process for me then of kind of starting to drag myself out of this pit that I found myself in. Am I there yet? No, I'm not there yet. There's, like I said before, there's no blueprint for it, but you just keep finding ways to get over things. And once you've kind of got that base of resilience, or start to build your resilience back up to it, and start to be aware of your own emotional state and your own emotional feelings, you can kind of acknowledge that, and you can kind of start to move forward a little bit, I think. And that's where I am now.
I keep saying this, a huge admiration. And one of the things I've really learned from interviewing great people like yourself is the way that they choose, the story going forward. You can't control what's happened in the past. You can't change it. But I think the difference between those that go on and is the way that they use it to mean something, to shape something, to use it and give it back. And I'm really encouraged by the fact that you're wanting to use this and share your story in the hope that you can help others. Like, talk to us about some of the things that you really hope to be. Well, what are you doing at the moment? You're joining podcasts and you're speaking. Where's that coming from, and what are you hoping through that?
Yeah, and you are absolutely right. You've got to use your experiences and make the best out of them. And I figured that out. It took a while to figure that out. I felt like actually out of all the bad stuff that's happened, I have an opportunity here to do something with it. And if for myself as well, it was for myself. I had to, it was either going to consume me in bitterness and negativity, or I flip it on its head and I turn this into something positive. And for me, that was the only option, because I can't be negative and bitter and be consumed with this upset and this anger for the rest of my life. It's no good. So I had to get into that mindset of, this is an opportunity, use it. How I'm using it, I don't know yet. It's early doors for me. I'm still exploring a number of things. Yes, I am doing some talking. I did my first talk actually this week to the banking industry, and it's literally just talking about, it's using my story around where I was mentally and emotionally, where I went to, and how I started to come back out of that. So yes, the story, my backstory is very unique and it's very policey, but everything that I learned about myself is relevant to any individual, any industry. And so I felt like I need to do something with this story. And if I can help just one person out of 100, even if they understand how they're feeling, or they feel like I say something and they go, you know what, that's how I felt, that's how I feel. So I'm not on my own with that. Or if it resonates with somebody in some way, then that's good, right? That can only be a good
100%.
thing.
And when we realize that the human experience is emotion, and yes, we have different experiences, but love, fear, anxiety, worry, depression, all the things that you've talked about, they're human experiences. So whilst we might not be able to experience what you have, when you talk about grieving, everyone's had to grieve something at some point. Everyone's had something outside of their control. And yeah, I'm really encouraged. I'm really excited to see how many lives that you're going to touch and make a positive difference in. It's going to be great, my friend.
Yeah, I hope so. You know what? I did one talk this week, and if I don't get the opportunity to do it again, I'm comfortable with that. That's fine. I've done what I want to do. And you know what? Going and doing public speaking is something that I never thought I would do. It terrifies me, and I've done it. Albeit it was on a webinar, albeit it wasn't face to face, but I've achieved something just in that itself, and I feel good about myself for that. So if it's anyone I do, then
that's amazing. It won't be, but I take the point. And I saw your LinkedIn post earlier, which basically said that you were this career cop, you didn't dream of speaking, and yet you're realizing that it's just simply a skill that you can develop, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Everybody's got it in them to do something. And it's so important as well to do something that is out of your comfort zone, I think, because you build, you learn from that. You learn from it, and you make yourself vulnerable. I know you've talked about vulnerability before. I know you did a short little piece on your podcast about vulnerability and being human, but I do truly believe that if you push yourself, you put yourself out there, and you kind of embrace those vulnerabilities and accept that it might not go right the first time, or you might not succeed the first time, but you do learn from that. And when you learn from that, you realize this is what I need to do. This is how it made me feel. This is what I need to do to not feel like that again. If it does go wrong again, you build that resilience, and actually you can then achieve what you want to achieve. I've learned that. I truly believe that resilience and vulnerability are so important, and they go hand in hand. You need both. You need to embrace both, I think. There might be an counter argument against that, but it's how I felt. It's what I learned about myself, so it's kind of relevant to me, I think.
With all that's gone on in the past, what gives you hope for the future?
That's a good question, Ryan. My life has gone through something really, really difficult, and it's been very, very rocky. And we, as a family, myself as an individual and as a family, we have all dragged ourselves through it, and we come out on the other side. And I kind of think, if we can get through adversity, we can get through major setbacks, and we're happy, we're content with our lives, and just makes you realize how strong we are as humans, isn't it? That you can go through something horrific, and people go through things horrific all the time, every single day, and you realize that people, to get through it, there is usually only a couple of options to get through that. You either drag yourself through that, or the other option is that you don't. And where does that lead? And most of the time we drag ourselves through it for the sake of yourself, for the sake of others, and you can come out learning so much, and you come out feeling proud and happy, and and that hope that if we can do this once, God forbid, I don't want it to happen again, don't get me wrong, I don't want to have to go through this again, but you can get through some really horrific times, and come out the other side and still feel different. I'm a different person to what I was before, but still feel good about yourself, and still feel like you've achieved something, and still feel like, what, we've succeeded in getting through that really hard time. And that's really important, I think, to look at it like that.
I let my community know that you were going to come on, and I asked them if they had any questions for you. And one of the questions was, how did he get through it? How did him and his family get through it? And I haven't asked you that question to this point because I felt that would have been your answer. It's binary, isn't it? You either do or you don't.
People have asked that, so it's a really good question, and it's not actually. I've been asked it before. It's a really good question. It's not something I actually know how to answer. Really, You just do it. You just do it. What's the alternative to not getting yourself through it? And that's what we kind of subconsciously thought. We never talked about it. We just got ourselves through it. And we have 2 young children, and so our focus, our end goal, was to make them feel as happy and safe as we possibly could, regardless of how we felt. We kept, we were honest and open with them, but we kept a lot of things from them. They didn't need to know the finer detail of all the things, the stresses that we had to fight, and all the battles that we had. But we had that focus, and it was of them, and it was just getting them through it, and each other as well. We just like, what, we have to do it. And we did. We like I said before, we dragged ourselves through it. I look back now and I just think, I don't know how we did it, but we did. And quite often it was my wife dragging me along with her, because she was the strong one for so long. And then I started to feel mentally stronger, and she took a step back, and then she dipped because it had taken its toll on her as well. But we kept just propping each other up throughout the whole process, and we still do that now. But I can't really verbalize how we got through it, other than what I've already said. We just did. It's just what you do. It's human nature to keep going, and you go into survival mode. And I went into survival mode in hospital when everything kind of started to get really difficult and started to go really, really wrong, and the control of our lives had just been stripped from us. I went into survival mode, but my focus for my survival mode was my wife and kids. I cut out everything else, all the treatment that I was getting, everything that wasn't important at that time. You just become numb to it, and you just cut it out and have that sole focus. And yeah, that helped to get through it. And it's still difficult now. We still have wobbles. My wife has wobbles. I have wobbles still now. But we talk about it. We make a point now. It's something that we never really used to do. Is we have this shared experience, and it's impacted us in similar ways. But we have there are different ways that we show it, but we talk about it. We make time to talk about how we're actually feeling, and just saying it. I'm having a bad day today, or I feel quite low today, and I don't know why. I feel really emotional today. I don't know why. I just cried at an advert. That happens to me. I become really emotional. I can cry at advert. I cried at Creed 2 the other week. I told my wife that, and she's like, "Really? You did?" I was like, "Yeah, I don't know why. I just did." And it changes you. But you start talking about it, and actually, it becomes quite funny. But yeah, that's how we managed to get through it, and we still are managing now. But it's easier than it was.
I love that. It's American Idol for me. It's those sob stories of where they've come from, and it gets me every time. I think too many people go through life feeling defined by their failures or the traumas. And I know that you're keen, not necessarily to be defined by it, but to be able to use this experience and shape your future. How do you want to be defined in the future? Or even now, how do you want the world to see Nick Bailey?
It's difficult, isn't it, I suppose, to not let it define you. Because I am where I am now because of what happened, and I'm doing or planning to do, exploring what my future because of what happened. And so it does define you in that way. I don't want to be known as the poisoned cop for the rest of my life. But if I am, I am. But I have to take the positives out of everything that's happened. I'd like to think that I would be defined or seen as someone who's pretty strong, who's someone who's quite resilient, albeit I didn't feel that myself. That's brave enough to talk about it. It's brave enough to be really honest about how it affected me emotionally and mentally. And I am. I can talk about that all day, about how it affected me, and be very brutally honest about it. Because I think it's important to do that. I think it's important to have those discussions and be open and honest about how we're feeling, because you bottle those kind of things up, it just becomes toxic, doesn't it? And creates this kind of feeling of tension and negativity around you and around everybody else. So you need to be open about it. It's really difficult to do sometimes, but you have to do it. So I don't really know how I want to be defined other than what I've already said. I don't know. It's a tricky one. I just like to feel content as well, quite happy in myself and feel content. And I'm starting to feel like that, which is good. It's nice to start to feel kind of at peace with myself. Good. Yeah.
Good. What does the phrase "always better than yesterday" mean to you?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask me difficult questions. What does it mean to me? I suppose it means to me that you go through life, you make mistakes, you learn from your mistakes, and everything that you achieve or you have achieved, you can take something away from, and you can build on it, and it can develop you, and it can make you stronger, it can make you more resilient, it can make you a better communicator. Everything that you do, you can learn from. And we're never perfect. Humans are not perfect. We can't be perfect. But you can strive to be better than you think you are, or better than you want to be. And I think I suppose that is what it means to me, I think.
I just encourage anyone that's watching or listening at this point just to search out, to connect with Nick. If you are a team leader, if you are in an organization that wants to look after the health and well-being of your people, get an engaging speaker, and make sure that Nick is top of your list. Make sure you go and contact him, bring him in, because as you've heard in the last half an hour to 40 minutes, this is this is an incredibly deep conversation, of which I imagine when you put a group of people together, sharing experiences can be life-changing and profound. So please do forward this on to someone you know who is in a position to influence many people, and be sure to get Nick in, whether that's in person or online. Nick, thank you for taking time out of your day, my friend.
No, thank you. It's been an
Really
absolute
grateful.
pleasure. I really appreciate your time, Ryan.
Could you leave us with a final thought from your good self?
Okay. I would say just stop. We all have flaws. We're not perfect. We are who we are. It's counterproductive to give yourself a hard time. Give yourself a break. Embrace who you are, how you changed for whatever reason, if you have changed or you feel like you've changed. And just be happy and content with what you've got and who you are, and you can shape your own future just off that embracing of what you've become and what you want to become. Stop giving yourself a hard time. It's something I did a lot of. I gave myself a hard time for a long time, and I stopped doing it, and I feel so much better for that now.
I love it. Such powerful words. Thank you so much, my friend.
No problem at all. Thank you.